Happy Tuesday. It's Playbooks Day.
I'm doing good. How are you?
Right. Um, I was excited to talk about tools and updates and things that like help see old tools like in a new light. Uh, and when you brought up you wanted to talk about the new playbooks related stuff that's going on in workflows right now, I would love, and I'm looking forward to diving into that with you today.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I I think I have a personal vendetta against HubSpot right now because I found so many workarounds to get around playbooks not being able to be triggered by a workflow, and then they made it that update. And I swear, like they're just like pranking me. It's like one giant prank. But yeah, so I want to test it out and
All
see
right,
how it works.
let's do it. I bet you learned a lot in that process of
I
all
did.
these workarounds that now that it's available, you're going to know exactly how to use it.
Yeah, and there's value in that in knowing, you know, how to that's the whole thing with HubSpot is you can build things. There's no one right way to build stuff in HubSpot. Um, so you don't have to do it with a workflow. You can trigger it the way, whatever way that I did before too. Um, and maybe you don't want to rebuild all of your processes just to go along with a new update. So there's lots of pros and cons, but
Well, that's a
let's
common balance that I think we hope to help people with. It's like when to, undo the work or redo the
right.
work that you've already done. Like how much time will you be saving? Is it worth the effort to just take a Friday afternoon and redo some stuff? We're seeing that a lot with like association labels as they improve
Right.
and get better, sync properties, all this stuff that um, is a lot of opportunity once people know it's available. But then, like, how ingrained is it in your process? And are you going to have to retrain people? And, all this stuff goes into account. So, as excited as we get about product updates, sometimes it's like you hit that wall of like, oh, now I've got to implement this effectively.
Yeah, definitely.
So how do you, so as we go through this, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you might approach that. Um,
Yeah. Well, like you said, I think whether you have to train people, your team is a huge aspect of that. If it doesn't affect anyone but you, and it's just kind of annoying that like you have your processes working another way and you'd rather kind of consolidate some things, then I think it makes sense. But yeah, if you have to retrain your whole team, then it's would you rather spend time undoing a lot of the work that you already put in to your strategic plans, or would you rather like keep moving forward on other strategic plans? Um, so you have to weigh that. Um, yeah, so I have the update up here just to reference too. Um, and because I was curious what it means to say that a workflow can trigger a workflow, or a workflow playbook can trigger a workflow. Um, because there's not here. Let's pull up a workflow.
so what was the problem? I think you can probably define that without reading from anything. Like when you were trying to use playbooks and bring them into your process, and then you went to go do stuff in workflows, what was the problem that you're running into?
Yeah, so I guess like what need do playbooks serve? They typically, like we've said over the past few weeks, they collect a lot of data. They serve as a reference for your teams when they're having conversations, but they also, if used properly and strategically, I guess, um, they're gates in your process. They define an end or a beginning of a stage in your process map. and your, customer journey, your sales funnel. So when that's the case, and you want to like create a deal from a workflow, or you want to reassign an object to a new user because the previous user's job is done now after they submitted the playbook, without automation, you're relying on that user to have to do that change manually. And now they have to remember the entire process, or they have to refer to your instructions. You want it to be automated because that's the whole point of this process. So, but yeah,
Okay.
you couldn't do it before. So
you couldn't use basically the execution of the playbook to trigger anything in the
right,
workflows directly, unless you had like a workaround that said like when this property gets updated like this or has this, then that's
right.
how we're doing it, instead
So
of
you
just
would,
like playbook submission.
right. So you would like rely on something that you do in the playbook to trigger something else. But then you run into other issues. Like, let's say you need them to edit a property. You need your users to update a property in order for it to, prove that they did that thing. But then if you want to prevent someone from moving forward in the process, they have edit permissions on that property because they needed to edit in the playbook. Oh geez, I'm getting all, it's lots of words. But then let's say it's a required property in order to change a deal stage. Now they can just skip the playbook because they can edit that property. So then what we did is we created another property. And if this property that they could edit was known or was yes or whatever, it made the other property that they didn't have permission to edit say true or whatever. So this is magical to not have to do.
Awesome. Well, let's see how magical it is.
Yeah, let's see. So yeah, so first thing, this is the same screen that we're used to. And like this is a good, like, honestly, there's so many different ways that you still could use this. Like there would be implications for each type of workflow. I'm going to go with contact because I think that makes the most sense for now. In my puzzles scenario, at least. So let's build what should we call it? Workflow triggered by playbook. We'll go with that for now. So I'm going to set up my trigger. And let's make sure I remember how to do this. When an event occurs. And then you can trigger it based on playbook log. And then this was what was exciting to me too.
Oh,
Yeah. So you can choose whether a certain playbook was logged or if a certain user logged any playbook, from what I am assuming. So let's say someone filled out my puzzles playbook. And there we go. And then that's it. The episode's over.
yeah. Well, honestly,
But that's huge.
that it could be for most
the
people,
episode's over.
right?
Yeah, like that's huge.
Like that's how simple it is to make this shift. And like, because of this separation from your workarounds in this case, like I guarantee there's a way to play with this and understand it. And again, we come back to mapping and understanding how we want it to work, to understand how it works before starting to replace stuff. And
Yes.
I'll be curious for your thoughts and maybe some of the use cases where you can think back to workarounds and how this might be better. But something that came to mind for me is I'm not a workflows expert by any means, but just as you were explaining that, like understanding the differences. And again, when we come back to understanding data model and how everything's structured in HubSpot, how properties and objects and records, and we just keep harping on these definitions because there's moments like this where let's say you had run into that wall in the past and then you built the workaround that said, when value is known or when value changes or when this property looks like this, you're still in your mind. If you haven't thought ahead, you're thinking that the only time those things happen to that property is when the playbook's submitted, right?
Yeah.
But the playbook submission is an activity, or in this case, an event that triggers the workflow. The property is like, data, right? It's a different thing that triggers. And in that case, where you build that workaround, I'm sure there's some gotchas to say, okay, there's like 20% of the time we have to go back and change that property, or that property might change sometime in the future. And the way we had to set up the workflow, it's going to re-trigger stuff. And now we've got to set up all these, risk management and, structures in place. It just creates so much more work to maintain it, that if you can switch to what we really want to do is, fine tune this around the playbook submission itself, now we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you think about it too, like what I just described, my workaround, I essentially had two identical properties. Obviously not identical, but like they served the same purpose in theory, but not like actually. So
And
that's horrible for, when you talk about like data governance. Like if you're doing an audit of all your properties, it's like, why do you have two, which one's which? How did you name it clearly so that, whoever built it and the team that's editing it and the team that's referring to it wherever you're then using it in your deal pipeline or whatever, how do you manage that all? So like this simplifies all of that.
Yeah. And I've seen it so many times, like, because we're trying to associate that data to the event. So we
Right.
create this like moment in time version of the property that nobody knows about, that's behind the scenes. But that's the kind of stuff that over time, starts to, impact the ability to maintain the system of data. And when you're bringing in new people in, or maybe your organization's growing and you've done that internally, and now you bring in an admin and they're doing an audit of the portal, and HubSpot is yelling at you because this property looks exactly like this other property. And why do you have duplicates? And, all this stuff starts to come up.
Everyone's greatest fear when you're training a new person and they're like, why did you do it that way? And you have to explain, like, there was a reason. I'm not just an idiot.
Yeah. Like, especially when stuff like this becomes available, it's like,
Yeah.
why didn't you just
Why
use
didn't you
this
just do
playbook
it this way?
submissions? Like, what are you doing? Should I even trust your judgment as an
Right.
admin? Like,
Right.
one, yes, you should. A lot is learned through that process, but that's also the challenge of HubSpot moving so quickly. So while the episode could end, let's take this moment to hit the plus
Yeah.
icon and talk about what we might want to trigger off of a playbook submission.
Yeah.
Or we could just ask AI.
I know. I was thinking that too. I don't think I've
Let's
seen
click
that.
it. Yes, I want to do this.
I can't even.
Well, you got to describe it. We got to prompt it a little bit, Madelyn.
No, it does. It's. I'm not allowed. We have to upgrade.
Ah, okay.
Huh. I'm pretty sure I'm a
To
super
turn on customer analysis.
weird.
So maybe you haven't checked the AI box and settings.
Yeah. Huh.
Okay, we'll try that later if we have time.
I don't know if I would ever feel safe doing that, to be honest. Why? Okay. So what would you do, Chris? Like how do you see what actions do you see happening? I
I
think
mean,
deal stages is a huge one for me, but
especially like, so handoffs, if I'm thinking handoffs, but immediately what came to mind is deal creation.
yeah.
Like if we have a first call or first engagement, especially if we're taking advantage of the leads object. And this is where,
Yeah.
can we associate lead objects with playbook activity? I'm not sure. But if somebody like an SDR, uh, like gets off the call and like that's a deal, like we need to make a deal, like they're usually having to manually, generate it or use a property or some other thing to trigger that. Uh, and that's where like, uh, even as I say that, it's like the importance of how the playbook is structured
Right. I
to support
yeah.
that. But this is where it's cool because as I'm saying that out loud, you can now, the submission is just a layer, right? Now you can say playbook submitted and property XYZ is a yes
Right.
instead of a no.
Right.
Now we
Yeah.
create a deal. If it's a no, then we create like an email, workflow that's nurturing, or we, you know, maybe we start to clean up our data and just things automatically get deleted. Man, what a world that would be.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, those are the things that come to mind.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Like not only can you trigger like one thing, one essential thing that you want to happen, but you can also do conditional logic. You can say if they said that it's this type of product or it's this amount, then do one of these two things, route it to one of these two team members. And you take that judgment call away from the rep who's filling out the playbook. They don't have to think about that anymore. And then just freeing them up to just kind of like go through the process as naturally as possible. Um, and that
Yeah,
made me think too, so you can create a record, and of course it won't let me right now for some reason, but you can create a record from within a playbook. But again, then the person filling out this playbook is having to do double work. They're having to fill out, they don't know, maybe they don't know whether to fill out the data on the playbook or to wait and put it on the deal or to, be filling out the deal info while they're still on a call, um, all of that kind of stuff. So this really streamlines that process so that you're not doing like two or three things all with the playbook window open.
yeah, man, this is so like, and the agility that this could give you, like while you're on a call, let's say you don't have multiple phases of SDRs and all the reps in the middle, and you engage somebody and you know immediately that they just want to buy today while they're on the phone with you, right? You can create shortcuts where it's like, uh, you know, playbook submitted, create this stuff. And then you just like, if simple clicks of buttons can transfer as much data along the process as possible, without a bunch of workflows, you know, running in the background, copying data everywhere,
Yeah.
right? Because that's the kind of stuff that even that can get in the way of real time. On a call, waiting for the deal to get created or waiting for the next thing to get created, refreshing 5 times, hoping that the workflow has completed.
Yeah.
Is not fun, but that's definitely feels like an opportunity here. And even like, uh, would you agree that even just like, so if there are workarounds, and let's say you did have some kind of workflow that triggered based on a property value that you wish, could be tied to a playbook. Now, like, since this is a separate, events, although I guess we've got to choose events
Yeah, because
versus
now the
other
playbook,
things.
well, the playbook is an event. The workflow is an event, kind of.
Because I was thinking, like, if you want to start testing this, your workflow will have to be triggered by an event already. But if you could just add, this filter of has completed playbook log next to whatever, the other event was, now that might be the only change you need to make to that workflow in terms of like
Yeah,
securing that that's the only way that's going to trigger it.
that's true.
Right.
Yeah.
So that should be a way that if it's, if the playbook is happening every time, right, then just adding that as an will
Yeah.
ensure that the playbook submission is the only time that gets triggered. So that could be a good place to start.
Wow. That's a lot of thinking. That's a lot of thinking. Like, because HubSpot admins who would be doing this, they're imagining 3 scenarios in their head, essentially thinking through
where
this.
where I'm messing with like a live automation workflow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm not a workflow expert by any means, so just throwing out ideas for people that might want to
Yeah,
consider
no,
this.
that is a great, yeah. Because that essentially, that, I don't know that that would be the end of it, but also I'm just scared. So I'm never going to think that would have 4 people check what I'm changing first. But
Maybe we clone the workflow first, and then
yeah,
we
well, at
add
least
that.
you're limiting what even goes through the rest of your process. And now you have a bookmark of, okay, on this date, we are starting to move towards the new process, where we're simplifying things. And that'll make cleanup a lot easier, any cleanup, that would even be required. If there's errors, you have a record of, oh, well, we changed the workflow on this date to add that criteria of the workflow had to be submitted. And then eventually later you make that the only criteria. So
Yeah, we've got options here. And just to kind of wrap, like, can you click on the type of record to create drop down? Deal ticket. So this is in the Let's Build portal, looks like.
yes, yes, yes.
So we have deal ticket contact company lead. And this is not because of the Event Happily app or anything like that. This is base HubSpot. We can create leads off of playbooks. So what jumps to mind there, it's like if we're doing like a customer success call and there's a question about how much something gets used, and they're like, oh yeah, we use that thing every day. And the answer is like 10 out of 10. Now, are we creating a lead for like an upgrade of that thing or like the next version of that thing or more of that thing?
Yeah.
Man, this is, you can, there's so much opportunity, but also in a way that you can standardize the hell out of it and know what's going on and track it and report on it. And we're not suggesting creating a bunch of restriction and structure around processes that don't deserve it or aren't enabled by it. But when you have this stuff in your portal and like the situation I just described, right? Like I know those conversations are happening every day. I know people have goals related to upsell, cross-sell, resell. This is a way you just connect those things immediately. Instead of relying on the customer success person to get off the call, log stuff in HubSpot, create the lead, assign the lead, right? Like all that stuff we just showed is like, you could take that out of their hands if it makes sense to take that out of their hands, right? Like, which won't always be the case, but just understand what your options are instead of saying, oh, this is overwhelming and we never hit these goals because the handoffs are too hard. And how do we keep track of all these things, right? Just let the system, work for you. And so many possibilities there, not to mention all the custom objects that were on that list.
Yep.
Like, come on, people, right? So this was awesome. And this is how simple, this can be. Just understanding that this trigger is now available to you probably opens up a lot of opportunity for a lot of people. Absolutely. And if you want help, understanding what that opportunity is, reach out to Madelyn. I know she'll be happy to help. If this resonated with you and you want to see, more deep dive on specific playbooks or maybe full workflow build outs or anything like that, please let us know and we'll be happy to add that. So definitely. Thanks so much, Madelyn.
Yeah, thank you. Happy Tuesday, everyone.
Happy Tuesday. And until next Tuesday, take a look at your playbooks, take a look at your workflow triggers, maybe any of those workarounds that you've seen or put into place. Find the opportunity and let's grow. Have a great day, everybody.